Life is equal to a concentration of light energy, period. There's nothing else that can add to that definition of life.
Welcome back to the Dr. Espen podcast. I'm your host, Espen. Today I'm joined by one of my personal heroes, Dr. Zach Bush. We're going to have a conversation about real medicine, real healing, about the importance of the gut biome and its connection to our health, our connection to Mother Earth, and where the future of medicine and or the future of health might be going.
Energy is infinite. All energy equals communication. All communication is there for the purpose of connection. With maximum connection through biodiverse systems, you end up with intelligence. With intelligence, you get physical design and ultimately the emergence of something like a human species. So this beautiful, elegant construct of light concentration becoming life is something that's, I think, a calling card now for the entire global scientific community. We need to stop studying the downstream consequences of a decrease in metabolism. We need to start moving our whole population to high metabolic states through really fundamental indigenous wisdom. One of the most powerful tools is
Welcome back to the Dr. Espen podcast. I'm your host, Espen. Today I'm joined by one of my personal heroes, Dr. Zach Bush, MD. We're going to have a conversation about real medicine, real healing, about the importance of the gut biome and its connection to our health, our connection to Mother Earth, and where the future of medicine and or the future of health might be going. I think many of you, particularly if you've been following our podcast and been one of our students or part of the community for a while, you would have heard of Dr. Zach Bush, as I've shared so much of his work over the years, as I really feel like he embodies what I refer to as a true physician, which is the teacher and the real healer, showing people that we have the power within us to do magnificent things. If you haven't heard of Dr. Zach, he's a board-certified physician specializing in internal medicine, endocrinology, and hospice care. He is an internationally recognized educator and thought leader in the microbiome, specifically how it relates to our health and disease and food systems, the connection between our mother, which is the earth, Gaia, and the connection between our gut and overall how important that symbiosis really is. He's the founder of the Seraphic Group and also the non-for-profit Farmers Footprint, and really important project that I want to discuss with everybody today, which is also called Project Biome, which is phenomenal, the work that's happening there. Dr. Zach's education has showed us that there's a need for rapid departure away from chemical farming and from pharmacy and move towards the holistic aspect of how to be healthy from the inside and out. And his ongoing efforts have provided a path, a blueprint for this, for consumers and farmers and mega industries to work together for the future of not only the people, but also the planet. It's an honor to have you on the show, Zach. How are you doing today, buddy?
Doc. I'm really glad to be with you. I'm thrilled to be with your whole audience. It's really a pleasure to be human at the moment.
Isn't it amazing? I mean, we recently, only a couple of months ago, had a chance to share a stage together on behalf of the Abu Dhabi government, which was at the Cayenne Wellness Festival, and we got to meet in person. I had the opportunity to do the introduction, and I was honored, man. I was tearing up as I was reading the bio, and no one's, we're not putting anyone on a pedestal here, but for me as a physician, it was really a privilege to present someone who I truly do believe stands for what medicine is evolving into, hopefully, and also embodies that. I just wanted to say to you that I really appreciate your work, and I know you work really hard traveling around the world, dedicating yourself to this work. And I just wanted to start with the acknowledgement and the appreciation for the work that you're doing and how many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives that you've impacted by this point. So thank you.
It takes a whole village to make anything happen in the world, so I'm surrounded by really good teams all over the world, and one of those is right there in Australia with you, the Farmers Footprint Australia team, led by the fearless Blair Beatty, and team there is wonderful. And so I always look forward to getting back with the indigenous wisdom that's pulsing out of your country. I'm just so amazed by the mob there. You got an incredible crew there of indigenous wisdom that's really awakening the world beyond Australia. And so I'm just so grateful for the Aboriginal and nearby the Maori friends that we have there in the community. And so I'm really grateful for all of you, all of the global tribe that's coming together to say something about this moment of awakening we're in. And I think Australia is well positioned to be a reunion moment between the ancient and the present moment, the future that we all feel in our hearts is possible. So let's go.
Let's go. I love how you started there because many, many years ago, I was burnt out 2016. I had 10 clinics. I exited a successful business, but I was really empty. I started my journey into Peru and I learned about the sacraments, and we call it medicine, plant medicine. So it seems like the indigenous wisdoms, for thousands of years across cultures and traditions have been right. There is medicine. Gaia is medicine. She has medicine. And if we can live in alignment with her, it seems like we could truly come back home, which is, as far as I'm concerned, our divine nature of health. Can you tell us a little bit about the connection between the gut and health and also our mother and why this is so important?
Yeah, my background was in cancer research. When I was doing my fellowship in endocrinology and metabolism, the first side of that specialty is in hormone medicine, understanding the coordination of the 4,000 hormones that come out of the body. Most of them actually derived from the bone. Bone marrow is the most active endocrine organ in the body, is even by endocrinologists today misunderstood and not recognized as such. But this massive intelligence of 4,000 communication networks that all form the body is the endocrine system that we're starting to just barely get a glimpse into. The fact that we think we know anything about thyroid or diabetes is the same thing as a physicist thinking they know something about quantum physics ultimately. So it's a mysterious universe of coordination and symphony of collaboration there. And then the second half of the subspecialty, metabolism, is focused on the non-human elements within the human cell that make life possible, which are the mitochondria. In the essence of life, what I've come to the conclusion of over the last 35 years of medical science and the rest is that life is equal to a concentration of light energy, period. There's nothing else that can add to that definition of life. Ultimately, you have this high concentration of light energy. The more energy you have per cubic centimeter, the more communication exists. So energy is infinite. All energy equals communication. All communication is there for the purpose of connection. With maximum connection through biodiverse systems, you end up with intelligence. With intelligence, you get physical design and ultimately the emergence of something like a human species. So this beautiful, elegant construct of light concentration becoming life is something that's, I think, a calling card now for the entire global scientific community is we need to stop studying the downstream consequences of a decrease in metabolism. We need to start moving our whole population to high metabolic states through really fundamental indigenous wisdom. One of the most powerful tools is song, chant, music around a campfire at night. We now know that even single elements within that scenario are potent activators of human regeneration and biologic regeneration. A good example of that is the stem cell. When the human eye glances down from the horizon and the brain senses a downward projection of the gaze into the frequencies that are created by flame, you get in a stimulation of stem cell activation throughout the body. So in this beautiful way, when we watch a campfire at night, we're activating the regenerative qualities of our body. Then if you add to that spiritual song or chant, then you get activation of the telomeres, which are the bumper blocks on the end of our genes that allow for this. And so the simple process of song and dance around a campfire is one of the most, I would put that against any biohacking technology on the planet. It cannot be superseded. This is what the divine gave us in community around nature and its elements of fire, water, air, and soil. So I can't wait for this whole movement to devolve in some ways around functional medicine and this fad of biohacking, all that. We need to stop believing there's something outside of the human experience that's going to improve biology that's been there iterating for 4 billion years on this planet and probably 15 billion years within this universe. We've got to just go into wonderment. And so for me, that's the nutshell is as we think about the microbiome as a foundation for health, what we're really saying is it is the biodiversity within nature that allows for intelligence to emerge. And that can happen at the immune system level, the genetic level, or the human neurologic system, as we would call it, human intelligence. Ultimately, intelligence beauty does not evolve within a single species. It evolves within an ecosystem of interconnected information streams.
I, for one, will go back and listen to that again, pause it, take notes, and play. Pause it, take notes. There's a lot in there, bro. I love how you talk about the indigenous wisdoms of and the elements and the sacredness of tradition and the sacredness of ceremony. It's been very interesting to observe so much healing that has come from that. And, sitting in ceremony doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have a sacrament or a so-called medicine. It could be, like Zach just said, with prayer, with song, with sitting with Grandpa Fire and being present and just returning home, returning home to the way that we know we used to live in alignment with the planet. We seem to have lost our path And it seems now that we're coming back. What do we need to do to come back on an individual level, then also on a global level? I mean, we have big pharma, we have all of these things that have a massive vested interest in, disease. What are some of the steps that we could take, Zach, in terms of, coming home?
Yeah, I think that ultimately we need to take radical responsibility for the creation of these, institutions or companies that we attribute so much power to. So we can understand that the pharmaceutical industry is about a $9 trillion industry globally. It's a chemical pharmaceutical company that treats both soil and humans in the same way, and that it's an antibiotic warfare. And so our farmers are trained into herbicide, pesticide destruction of the ecosystem to sterilize the system so there's no competition for nutrients within the soil for a monoculture corn, soybean, wheat that will grow at millions of hectares at a time in Australia. And so there's that side. And then there's the other side, which is trillions of dollars going into small molecule chemistry to disrupt human biology and disease pathways, inflammation pathways in the name of health. And so those two conglomerates together, a $9 trillion, pharmaceutical industry and human health, a similar number in human food systems and the agrochemical environment at large. And suddenly you've got, $20 trillion industry, or about, 20% of the entire global GDP going to these small molecule chemical companies that are producing largely antibiotics. And so the antibiotic industry of pharma has been destroying the nature of it. And it's, to their credit, they put it right in the branding, antibiotic. The word biotic is a framing of the word biosis. A biotic and biosis refer to, if you look that up in the dictionary, you get something like in reference to the complex relationships that allow for the web of life to occur. So if that's biotic or biosis, and then you are antibiotic, you are literally just disrupting all of the relationships that allow life to occur. And so in fairness to the industry, they told us exactly what they were going to do, which was destroy the relationships to nature within us and around us through our chemical ag, chemical pharma, and the rest. So that's what we all created together. And we did that because of our inherent fear of nature. And so there's this deep abandonment disorder that runs within the human species that leads to our fear, guilt, and shame around our relationship to nature. We fear it, so we hunt into extinction anything bigger than ourselves, and then we create small molecules to destroy all of the invisible threats, viruses, bacteria, fungi, yeast. And so we're on this antibiotic thing, not because we're really even understand a virus, let alone afraid of it. We're afraid that we're not enough. We're afraid that we don't deserve the grace of the divine, the grace of the universe at large. And so for this, we developed this adversarial relationship to nature. And somebody comes along and says, hey, here's an antibiotic. And we're like, oh my gosh, thank goodness for the antibiotic, because nature was warring against me. I was kicked out of nature. Go do our religious mythology, or otherwise we have this deep concern that we didn't make the grade, or we did something shameful, or we feel guilt for what we've done to the earth. And so we have this inferiority complex that then leads to chemical dependence, whether it be alcohol, antibiotics, antidepressants, plant medicine, ketamine, whatever the heck the new fad is, that if we're offered a drug that says this will help you feel reconnected, or this will decrease your fear, guilt, and shame by numbing you out, we'll sign up in droves. And this is what drives the $9 trillion pharma industry, is our own fear, guilt, and shame. And so we've got to really get down deep, deep, deep if we're going to solve this problem. It's not Monsanto's fault. It's not Bayer's fault. It's not, Merck or pharmaceutical companies. It's a fundamental human trait that that's leading to this toxicity in our environment and the collective human behavior. So it's part of the problem when we go and say, oh, it's their fault over there, and there's the Darth Vader of the oil and gas companies, or, they're making carbon and whatever it is that we demonize. And we do this across the board, which I'm always kind of amazed by. The functional medicine doctors will demonize the allopathic training that they received to get their MD or their DC or whatever it is, and then they kick the doc off the stool and they get back on the same stool and say, well, look at this, I've got all these other tools. I've got peptides and IV drips and glutathione and cold plunge, and I've got all this stuff that'll make you better, instead of us really sitting down as a humanity and saying, oh my God, we're a freaking miracle. We are the most complex stacked geometry that this planet has created so far, and therefore we create this community effect where tens of thousands of species, the microbiome, can speak through a single neurology, which is now our understanding of the gut microbiome. It's typing on the keyboards of your intelligence on your gut lining. There's all these neurons that stick out from your gut lining to listen to the bacteria, the fungi, the protozoa, and even the parasites to get the feedback to create the pattern recognition to have an intelligent thought or a creative stream of consciousness. We need to really settle into this. We are Mother Earth speaking through a single neurology, and therefore we call it human. But in fact, human is not a species. It is an ecosystem in concert. This is the symphony of life within this earth speaking through our intelligence, our beauty, our art, our song, our music. We need to settle into this and just relax. We got to relax for a moment and be like, oh my, we are the expression of nature. We're the imagination of nature. She imagined us through the biome, which is a description of the entire database of genetic possibilities that haven't happened yet. We got to stop fearing and demonizing viruses and realize this is what nature does. When she's under an extinction level stress, all species start to produce exosomes, which are new genetic potentials for the future of the planet. And every single extinction leads to an explosion of beauty, biodiversity, and even higher intelligence than it had before the extinction event. So nature is constantly expressing the next possibility, the next higher vibration of itself. Nature is on a path of ascension. And right now, you are an ascendant being. You are a being of nature that's ascending energy through you every time you eat. I don't care if it's protein, carbohydrates, fats, all this stuff. We got to stop arguing over what ideal nature is, nutrition is, food systems. No more of this keto versus vegan and everything. We need to be in grace together, and we need to be in gratitude together over the way in which nature creates abundance within herself that would feed us into this possibility to be a center point for all of nature, to speak its intelligence, to speak its own beauty so that we could see our own beauty.
It's taking a moment to let all that land. Beautiful. As we recognize ourselves in each other and as we recognize ourselves as a unique expression of source, we can see there's a lot of tools and technologies that have been arriving or remembered maybe over the last however many years. The last 10 years, we've been through a rough patch. We've been forced into separation. We have experienced, you can call it a pandemic, sickness, disease, but many would say that the real pandemic was the vibration of fear. Many have come home to the realization that we are sovereign beings. And in this comes a great opportunity. In my hypothesis, what I share is that there's nothing wrong. It's just a collective expression of our own consciousness. And what I teach is that we are removing interference. We're not broken. We are just learning. And as we're learning, we can let go. And you mentioned fear, guilt, shame, the lower frequency emotions. So I take people through a process of actually clearing this and connecting with nature and connecting with God in the way that you are by basically healing lower frequency emotions. To what point, now that we've seen the spiritual side, we've seen the physical side, we've talked on the biome, we've talked about our connection with source, at what point do you find now that emotions play a role in something that we might not have realized before? And it just, before I hand over to you to answer, something that gave me the longest truth bump that I've had so far this year was a presentation that you did when you talked about the unique energy frequency of authenticity. So can you talk a little bit about human emotion and about what you've discovered when you studied the frequency of authenticity, please?
Yeah. We'll start with the emotional side. Chinese medicine for about 9,000 years has advanced the understanding that every human disease is based on or founded necessarily in an unmetabolized or stored emotion. And the Chinese have worked out over time exactly which emotion is stuck in which organ systems. So some examples of this is the lower lung is unresolved grief, unprocessed grief stores in the base of the lungs. So anything from lung cancer to pneumonia to chronic bronchitis, all of these things are symptomatic of a lodged emotion of unprocessed grief that the individual is probably unaware of on some level, and it's stored there. Pancreatic cancer being a poignant one, is this unresolved anger that can be generational as much as it is personal. And so this unexpressed anger sits there in the pancreas and disrupts biology until a cancer occurs. Bitterness, you can look at the gallbladder. Worry, the spleen. Stress over the nest. And so this is, immediate stress or anxiety around the financial or biologic wellness of your family or the home. Low back pain, sacroiliac stuff, a sense of being unworthy of being seen or frustrated at not being seen, colon cancer, this kind of shadow. I'm stuck in the shadows. Nobody appreciates me. I can't do enough. It's never enough. I can't do enough to be worthy. This is the overserver and the breast cancer, comes out of that kind of thing. So each of these organ systems, guilt, this deep sense of shame or guilt, prostate enlargement, prostatitis, prostate cancer in the male. And so this wounded masculine is expressing itself in males at a rate of 70% of males by age 70 have microscopic evidence of prostate cancer. And so that's a deep wound within the masculine, saying that we carry guilt and shame around the way that we are unable to protect and to serve the feminine within ourselves or our homes or our communities. And so we carry this around as an emotional stress and emotional trauma. And therefore, prostate cancer, 70% of males by age 70 and 50% by age 50. So it's just this really chronic inflammation that sits in these organ systems when there's unresolved emotion. Why is emotion so bad? Because it seems like we so extol emotion as such a good thing. All of our great storytelling in the world is emotional storytelling. Look no further than Hollywood and Disney to show the power of emotional storytelling. It captures all of us. The industry of the romantic comedy, my gosh, is there anything more potent on the feminine psyche than a romantic comedy? It's just like we are so drawn to the story that captures an emotion. So how can that possibly be the foundation of disease? And that's taken me, 15 years to really bore down on. I left the academic environment in 2010, 15 years. I've been kind of in this more holistic understanding. I purchased a Chinese medicine clinic and acupuncture and traditional Chinese herbal medicine and all that. That was part of it, but it was Reiki. I had a chiropractor in my clinic often. I was in ecological therapy. Like it was like all blended, wonderful indigenous and ancient wisdom, as well as some of these new technologies coming in to be witness to the miracle of life within a human being. And along that journey, my own personal life started to expose the vulnerabilities of moving from the head space down into the heart space. And when I start to crave from the heart space, I seem to create more turbulence, not less. Seems like such a good thing. And we extol the heart. We extol the emotion of love. We extol the emotion of joy, all these things. In the end, what I have come to conclude, and this can be an unverified piece of data, so all of you go test this in your own experience. So I'm not trying to preach a gospel at you here. I'm just in my own experience. I would say that emotions are the high fructose corn syrup of feelings. What I mean by that is that the natural phenomenon of a feeling turns into a toxin when it is distilled or processed into an emotion. The way in which high fructose corn syrup function is that fructose is one of the most important carbohydrates in nature. It's one of the most potent ways to create light energy inside of a human being or an earthworm or anything else multicellular. And so fructose is an incredibly powerful tool of nature to energize that concentration of light that creates life. But if you take the mirror image of that molecule and you create what's called the racemic or the mirror image molecularly, you now don't have fructose, you have high fructose corn syrup, which is a chemically processed food additive that replaces sugar as a sweetener. And the fructose in the corn has never caused biologic injury. The high fructose corn syrup doesn't even get recognized as a carbohydrate by the liver, confuses the hell out of the liver. So the liver can only guess that maybe it's a triglyceride. And so it packages up that cholesterol, that sugar, as if it was a cholesterol, puts it into triglycerides. And so half an hour after drinking, a Coca-Cola, your blood sugar does not spike. It's actually triglycerides go through the roof because the body can't even figure out that that's a carbohydrate and is treating it as if it's some sort of, molecular alteration of a fat. In the same way, the body cannot figure out how to metabolize the emotion, which is the mirror image of the feeling. And so this is my own conclusion. Again, go test this yourselves and see how you think about this. But I'm excited by the possibility that when I start to feel life, rather than interpret the feeling through my brain and therefore distill it into an emotion, then I stay free of disease. When I become a feeling vessel and don't take the tendency or the behavioral pattern of turning that into an emotion, I will have these waves of experience. And in being an experiential human, these big waves will wipe clean the territory of my biology so that I have this. So you can think of this as like big wave surfing. And for all of you surfers out there, that when you're learning how to surf, which I'm still doing because I didn't learn until I was in my mid 40s, so I will never be a good surfer. So I'm just the happiest bad surfer in the water. I've been told that the best surfer in the water is the happiest person or the one having most joy. So maybe I'm the best surfer, but get out there and when you're learning, you get on these little ripple waves and you're on these little ankle biters and you're trying to like figure out how to stand the heck up on a board. And frankly, it's really difficult. And so when you're learning, you're actually doing the most difficult thing, which is a board that's not fully immersed in the wave and not experience the power, and you're in this kind of wobbly state. Then you finally get the confidence to go out and paddle out past the break and then catch a wave. And there's so many falls that's ridiculous, but eventually you feel the energy of the big wave. The amount of joy that happens in the physical body when it is swept up in a bigger wave and it is carried by nature in this powerful way, all of that joy erases all of the frustration and trauma of being a beginner surfer, and suddenly you're just in flow. That is a description of any behavior of humans. Surfing, any sport out there, music itself. My best expression of this is in music. So when I sit down on the piano and lose my care about anything and realize I'm just playing for myself and get into a flow state, something beautiful can flow through there, and some new chord progression or some new note is hit or some new trill on the right hand happens. I'm like, oh my God, that was spectacular. This is the divine coming through. And then suddenly all the frustration of not hitting the right notes all those years is completely erased. You don't even remember that happening. And you're just in this joy, this ecstatic state of the energy of creation coming through a human body. And so big wave surfing that clears all of the trauma of humanity is feeling life. A good way to create the disease out of that is then sit around at night and be like, I had this feeling, and so that must have been happiness, or that must have been love. I felt in love today, or I felt joy today. No, now you're thinking about it. Now you're putting a human construct or a mental abstraction on it, and now you're creating an emotion, and now you're gonna have to store that in the body because the physical body doesn't know how to deal with that because you just created high fructose corn syrup out of your feelings, and now you're lodging that in your organ system. When you lodge an emotion, this is now a vibrational frequency. And so feeling is a big wave. Unconditional love is something that I think is the purpose of humanity, perhaps. The beginning of the wave of unconditional love and the end of the wave is going to be grief, because ultimately all change requires grief. So the feeling of unconditional love begins and ends in grief. But nobody tells you that that's love. They tell you love is this high frequency, like, oh my gosh, I feel loved, I'm seen, that's special. That's the danger, is that we take the one vibration and then define the feeling by that one vibration. Now we've created the abstraction, now we've created the thing. And now you're going to run around in life trying to find somebody to love you, which means try to hit that one little frequency. And what is happening there is you've now taken this extraordinary feeling of witnessing beauty within the universe and the loss that's going to happen as soon as you see the beauty, because it's going to change, because you're a finite being, finite version of an infinite being. In that finite expression, you're going to be losing everything all the time. You have a lover, you have a wife, you have kids, you have a job. It's all going to disappear. You came into the world alone. You're going to leave the world alone. So you're going to lose everything that you've ever experienced. You are having the finite experience of seeing beauty when you're disconnected from singularity, so that you can witness the beauty more thoroughly. And so this is my fascination with emotions, is, wow, we do so much harm to the body when we are unable to, or afraid perhaps, to feel the whole experience of being human.
And also the distinction between the emotion and the feeling. I want to show you something quickly, and then we want to get to authenticity. When similar to you, I left clinical practice, which was 2016 for me. I started sitting in stillness because I recognized how busy I'd been for so long. And I started having visions, and I started receiving messages, and I started embodying or receiving codes, I would say. And I saw an ancient system, an Ayurvedic system, that showed that certain lower frequency emotions would block the life force that went through the body. And, you mentioned them primarily, by the Hawkins scale as well. Some of the lower ones are fear, guilt, and shame. You spoke to grief, specifically in the lower part of the lungs. You spoke to pancreas being connected to anger. You spoke to spleen being worry, guilt being prostate. I just want to show you this because you might have seen this before. Basically, what I ended up doing is creating a curriculum around this. So I'll take people into a room. We'll teach them the remembrance. Who are you? I'm not just the body or the mind. I'm consciousness. And then that these lower frequency emotions distort the energy of the body and stop us from filling up with light and connecting to God and being, in our own unique expression. So I just want to show you this because you might have seen this before. If not, it's basically what you said in different words. So fear blocks the first energy center at the base. which is connected to obviously survival and the way we experience life. Guilt blocks the second one, which is again what you mentioned before in regards to the prostate. And shame blocks the third one. Grief is a big one. And then lies, so on and so forth. And illusion of separation will block the pineal. Our connection to God is blocked by earthly attachments, our addictions to the materialistic world, and so on. And it connects and correlates with the body map. And so what I see in students and patients is that when they have grief, it does affect, as you said, the heart, chest, lungs, shoulders, and or anything in this area. And of course, it could be other things too. But I found the connection to be quite incredible. So basically, my curriculum is take them from the bottom. We go through the fear. We feel the guilt. We sit with the shame. We really sit with the grief so that we can turn it back to gratitude. Is this something similar to what you found in your work? And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a very good corollary to everything we saw. We were using in my clinic a camera that was made in St. Petersburg, Russia by an inventor there, Konstantin Krakow. And this technology just...
Carillion photography?
Yeah, this is kind of a next generation. So Carillion is a passive way of looking at the glow that comes off of any living structure, a leaf, a human, whatever. It's called gas distribution velocity camera. And so what you're doing, instead of taking the glow, you're actually inducing an explosion off the fingertips. And so it's a polarized lens that can pulse electricity off the surface. Current pulses for a split second. When that high voltage passes across the fingertip, it's at a low current, so you don't feel it. But that high voltage creates a plasma discharge from the surface of the fingertip. And in that explosion, it does exactly what a supernova does in space, which is it reveals the electromagnetic field beneath the surface, or the electromagnetic field of the individual. And what happened as Constantine did this to hundreds of thousands of patients around the world is he realized that there's a very specific fingerprint of stress that's formed by every single human being. And you move from an electromagnetic field of syntropy, this organized field, to entropy, where you get chaotic bursts and explosions, or in the form of chronic inflammation, like you get severe depletion of the energy field. And interestingly, it almost looks like, it's segments missing and then coherence, and then segments of chaos and then coherence. And so it looked so segmented that he knew that he had found something really unique. And it was when he met a chiropractor in the United States who'd spent his career and kind of his whole dharma was to map the reflexology map of the human fingertip. The Chinese had done the foot famously. And so anytime you go for reflexology to any clinic, that's typically on the foot. But with the combination of the fingertip, a reflexology map showing which sectors correlate with the internal organs, overlaid with these images, they suddenly had the perfect, kind of diagnostic, prognostic tool saying, wow, this individual is carrying stress in the spleen or the liver or the right kidney based on the 10 finger expression. So you image each finger individually with and without filter, and you get an enormous amount of data around where that individual is carrying their emotional paradigm of stress and depletion, or syntropy and coherence, depending on the personality and their environment. So that became a really great tool to kind of reassure me that I wasn't making this up, or I wasn't just like trusting ancient science. I had a tool that was really validating everything in real time. So that was what I needed, because I hadn't really gotten into my full vertical trust yet. And I don't even know if I'm there yet, but it's useful for the human mind to have, a visible model of what's going on within these constructs. So we imaged thousands and thousands of patients many, many times in sequence. And so we got to see people go from, a new diagnosis of cancer to death. And we got to see people go from advanced cancers to health. We got to see everything, autoimmune disease in children. Like, we imaged so many things over time, and we got trained really well by the Russian team. Konstantin's team was amazing, and they've done so much brilliant work. Like, to just honor the Russian science that's going on here. Like, they're just light years ahead of where the West is and Europe or otherwise. So to our brothers and sisters in Russia, Ukraine, just honor the deep traditions. Czech Republic, like the Eastern Bloc and of Europe and Russia, there's deep human remembrance there of the mathematics of being human, and is steeped in ancient traditions. You look at anything from the ancient Kabbalah all the way to some of the pre-Abrahamic religions. Persian cultures have preserved a lot of this historically. Hermetic studies past and all these things coming out of that area of the world. I'm exhausted of the demonization of nations, demonizing one another. We are a beautiful expression of nature as a global society, and we need to stop thinking of one world governments, and we need to start to just give reverence over the sovereignty and the self-expression of each culture that was informed by that part of the earth that was there to transmit something of the original codes of life itself, the divine, the nature of the universe, the cosmos, and earth itself, all within these wisdom lines that came through. So anyway, from China and Japan, with the acupuncture technologies, the Reiki that we practiced in clinic, all the way to the Russian technologies. And I think really the indigenous wisdom that came out of women worldwide is so important to recognize, whether it be the medicine women in any shamanic culture of South America or Africa. The Go-Go's of Africa have been big influence on my sense of reality in recent years, all the way to the wisdom lines that came through women in Eastern Europe or Scandinavia, into the Inuits, into, I think of Faya, who's a neighbor to you there in Australia. She's an incredible Maori wisdom keeper, raised actually by Aboriginal grandmother. And all of this. And so she carries multiple lines of indigenous wisdom. I've traveled all over the world with her and the Earthrise Collective with Kuban Moodley and Rutendo Ngaro, who are the founders of that group. And they're out of South Africa. And there's just so much coming forward right now. My brothers and sisters in the Amazon right now that are suffering so much under the extremity of Chinese development of the Amazon and exploitation of the resources there. It just goes on and on. But what I'm seeing on every single continent is this, what you mentioned earlier, which is remembrance. And we are no longer playing out this victim perpetrator code. And we're starting to remember, wait, there's victim perpetrator, which is two sides of the same coin. And then there's creator and there's receiver. And those are the two sides of the great coin that we could step into. And let's start flipping that coin. I receive and therefore I give. I give and therefore I receive. That's where we need to move to as humanity. Victim perpetrator is the old currency. Gifting and receiving is the future currency that will put us into a very high vibration state of human expression, creativity, artistic outflow. And that's where we will start to heal some of these deep, deep wounds that nature has solutions to.
Beautiful. So it's a fair comment to say that when we're out of nature, we get unwell or symptoms of disease or disconnection, and that these emotions are stored in the body and related to the energy system. And when they're in the body, obviously they're creating sickness and disease in different ways. But if we could come back to that connection and we could not have stored lower frequency emotions in the body, but a feeling of connection and a feeling of reverence to what is, we would heal and move towards coming home. Is that a fair statement?
Truth right there. I think, if you want to distill down what's the chronic disease epidemic, is a steady decline in the metabolic function of biology, including humans. And so as our metabolism, our ability to concentrate light energy decreases, we start to reduce our capacity for repair, regeneration, and return to the information stream of our original math. Therefore, we deteriorate. As we deteriorate the energy field, we become prone to an emotional interpretation of our feelings. We start to lodge emotions in that deteriorating energy field and therefore disrupt the original math further. And then we get into this vicious kind of toilet spiraling pattern of inflammation into dysfunction, into miscommunication, and all of this. So that's where my laboratory stepped in many years ago. In 2012, we started studying soil. And in that journey, we uncovered these molecules made by bacteria and fungi. It tied back to my chemotherapy development research at the University of Virginia, where I was creating drugs, and realized that the microbiome of the soil was making the very molecules that turn on mitochondria to produce the light energy from our nature, whether it be glucose, fatty acids, or the rice. And so it's the beginning of our journey into understanding this direct relationship between the soil and human biology. We all have kind of popularized now the concept of gut health. But gut health is simply a kind of humanistic version or an anthropocentric version of describing the ecosystem at large. Our gut microflora is always going to be in a direct relationship to how connected we are to the soil, water, and air around us. As we start to create these sterilized environments disconnected from nature, the microbiome intelligence decreases. The number of species interacting is decreased, and therefore the intelligence starts to decline. As the intelligence declines, the light energy declines, metabolism decreases. With that, you stop repairing at the same rate. With that, you start storing unhealed trauma. With the accumulation of trauma, you eventually get to cancer. And so this is the pattern of disease we're now manifesting at an incredible rate. Go to the United States to go visit the highest rates of disease in the world. We have the highest rates of death of neonates in the world. It's more dangerous to be born in the United States with a day one mortality than anywhere else in the developed world. And so we are masters of this. You can go down to Houston for a single city to watch us build cityscapes of 6, towers to house our children with cancer. We are so sick from our disconnect from nature. And so at every level, it is nature deficit disorder that ultimately,
Oh,
creates this phenomenon. And so when we plug back into nature, her grace is so much greater than any disease we can manifest it. And we forgive ourselves so quickly when we reconnect to nature. And so we've got to start rebuilding city systems, energy systems, information technologies, transportation systems. We need to erase education altogether and start experiential learning within nature again for our children. And then we express a different humanity that is probably more humane. Our inhumanity comes out of this nature deficit disorder.
nature deficit disorder. Wow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, I got two last questions for you if you have time.
Yeah, I think we got, yeah. Well, I'm a little late for the next one, but that's fine. We started late, so I'll give you a few more minutes here. Go for it.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Quick question. The frequency of authenticity, I think you mentioned in some of your research, is 40 times more powerful than the frequency of love. Just give us a quick 30 seconds on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, this was a study that got done not by my lab, but by another group, and they were placing humans inside of a Faraday cage. Faraday cage is a description of a wired net that is grounded. And when you connect a wired network to the ground, you create basically an electromagnetic field shield. We cloak a lot of our high sensitivity electronics in this. And so you go into any military installation of technology that's sensing deep space or, absolute zero or any of these extreme physics tests, they have to put them in a Faraday cage so that when you walk in, your physical body or your cell phone doesn't disrupt the measurement field that they're trying to isolate to get these very tiny, tiny exact measurements of electromagnetic fields. So Faraday cage, old technology. This was practiced in the 1800s and everything else was recognized to be a mechanism of shield. And so they were putting humans inside of a Faraday cage and then measuring the electromagnetic resonance or output of the human body as a transmitter. And then within that controlled space, they were having people review the stories of their lives. Tell me about, the birth of your first child. And so the parent would go on this great journey of remembering the overwhelming sensation of unconditional love that comes into you when you see the face and witness the first breath of your first child and all of this. Measure that. Okay, that's the frequency of, unconditional love. And the premise of the whole study was that love and joy were the highest frequency things that humans do. What seemed to be inexplicably happening is they could take people and say, tell me about your divorce, or tell me about, the time you were betrayed, or what. So they'd take people into these dark shadow sides. And whether it was on the shadow side or in these high states of kind of expressing these high vibration experience, intermittently they were seeing these massive spikes in energetic output from the body. And so they started getting interested in that because they seemed to happen at a similar frequency in the shadow side as it was in these quote unquote high vibration states. And this thing was a spike that was 40 times higher than unconditional love and joy. And so they were trying to figure out what the hell is that thing. They repeated the study then, and it's my understanding with a new premise of that there was, these states of what you might call flow state, where you were no longer telling your emotional story and you were actually fully present.
Mm-hmm.
What they ended up interpreting through this journey is that when you have an authentic expression, whether it be anger, joy, love, when it comes from core, when it comes from that true point of vertical relationship from heaven to earth, and you're coming from your source energy, you put out, 40x what the human body can do in any state of experiencing its environment. And so this is what I try to remember in my own life of, am I living a reactive life of looking outside of myself to establish feelings to justify the way in which I'm experiencing life inside of me? Or am I starting to live life within myself and accepting that everything I feel is my responsibility and it's my universe? I need to take advantage of the opportunity to take radical responsibility, because if I do, then I stop judging and, projecting on every other being around me.
Mm.
What you're experiencing is not my fault. It's not your wife's fault. It's not your child's fault. It's not your mother's fault. This is your personal experience. You're creating that. This incredible wisdom keeper that I study under all the time now is just a powerful, remembrance of the math that came before our modern religions. And it's often referred to as the Kabbalah. But this came out of that or was preserved within this body of knowledge. When asked recently, do humans have free will? He said something absolutely mind-boggling and beautiful to me. He said, no, absolutely not. Humans absolutely have no free will. There are so many factors in the universe. You imagine how tiny the Earth is compared to the 4 or 5 billion suns and solar systems within our galaxy. Multiply that by 2.5 trillion galaxies, and that's in an expanse of hundreds of millions of light years and things. And then you've got a little human sitting on one little planet within that expanse. And you're going to tell me that thing can decide outside of the influence of all the rest of the universe as to what it's going to do? There's no such thing as free will. But the human being is gifted with the infinite free will to decide how it's going to experience its reality. That, my friends, is freedom. If you start to realize that you have all of the capacity to decide how you are going to experience the reality that is happening to you and through you, then you have the power to write your own destiny. It is your capacity to feel what you're feeling and stop distilling it into emotions, stop storing it for future disease. Feel what you're feeling and realize that you are entirely creating that experience as a witness to the universe around you, as a witness to the universe within you. And now you're human. And now you are in your authentic self. And now you vibrate at frequencies 40 times that of love and joy. You are true. You are true. You are a phenomenon within space-time that does not regard time. You are an infinite being. You are a miracle. This is you. This is me. I have nothing to do with you other than that. I am witnessed by you. Therefore, I am more crystalline for being witnessed. But I am me and you are you, and it will never be different than that. And so I want you guys to walk away from this experience knowing that you are true. That is where your healing will begin. And if you just know that everything you're experiencing is also true and is also at your infinite capacity to change the way you are feeling based on your perception of your empowered sovereign state, now you don't need doctors anymore. Now you don't need supplements anymore. Now you don't need an Aura ring to tell you you're sleeping. Stop sleeping, for God's sakes, and just freaking dream. The indigenous people of the Amazon taught me something amazing down there. The Achuar told me at like 4 o'clock in the morning around fire again. They wake up at 4 a.m. right when dreams are at their peak. They're not trying to get their 6.2 hours that Dave Asprey in the biohacking world will tell you should get. They wake up at 4 a.m. so that they can remember their dreams best. And then they sit around fire and they drink chicha, which is their fermented, alcohol that allows them to be safe drinking a liquid in the Amazon rainforest. They drink chicha around the fire and they share their dreams and they interpret their dreams for one another. We need to stop being so stressed out about how much REM, and we need to realize that the dream is real. The dreams that you dream are real. And what the author told me one morning was that the difference between your reality and your dreams is that there is no doubt in your dreams. And so which one is true? Which one is true? Is your waking reality where you have so many doubts about yourself and is that reality? Or your dreams where there is never any doubt, the true reality that you live within? So start dreaming, you all. Dive into the dream. Stop being concerned about how much sleep you're getting and start wondering at how much dream you're dreaming. And then go live there until you have remembered who you are. Become that authentic self such that the real you starts to come through, whether awake or dreaming. And perhaps those two can merge into the same reality. And instead of escaping our physical biology in our meditations, in our spiritual practices, in our pursuit of plant medicine experiences, where we go escape to find, oh my gosh, I'm loved by God and everything's singular. We need to stop that escapism and we need to practice the embodiment of a spiritual being ready to have a physical, finite experience of life through the birth and the death. And there's nothing different than the birth and the death. Those are two finite endpoints in and of themselves that allow for the beginning to happen again. And so you are beginning and you are ending and you are beginning and you are true and you are always true. The vibrations within you are true. And that's all that matters.
Ladies and gentlemen, if this has touched your heart and mind and you feel the way I feel, share this far and wide. Share this with as many people as you can. And if you want to learn more, the website is Zach Bush MD in one word. So Zach Bush MD. And on Instagram, it's Zach Bush MD. Just go to Instagram right now. I just want to say special thank you, Dr. Zach. I love you, brother. Thank you so much for your time.
Grateful to be with you, Doc, and the whole audience. You guys co-created this whole experience together. It's not coming through me, it's coming through us, and I'm in wonderment of all that beauty.
You're amazing. Enjoy your next interview. God bless. Until next time.